thank you for coming out here in this cold weather. We have a crisis of leadership in New York, and it's not just in the governor's office. Andrew Cuomo's reign of corruption, incompetence, and abuse has only been allowed to go on for so long because of the culture of enablers inside the New York State Legislature. What we are witnessing is the peril of one-party rule in New York. There are far too many legislators who are more worried about protecting their own backside or being punished by the governor than they are for standing up for what's right. Nowhere has that been on greater display than this dirty deal, what they're claiming ends the governor's emergency powers. For nearly 10 months, Republicans across New York have been calling for the governor's extraordinary emergency powers to be reined in and for state legislators to go back to doing their job that they were sworn in to do. And every day since the beginning of this legislative session in 2021, Republicans in both houses have been putting forth amendments to strip those powers and return the representative democracy that New York state taxpayers are entitled to in our Constitution. And every day, those same Democrats that run this place have voted those down. They have voted to affirm the governor's emergency powers. And it was only when the governor was knee-deep in two different scandals and investigations were announced did they even start to talk about the prospect of taking their own power back. For the last 2 weeks, that's all it's been. It's been talk with zero action. But then, wouldn't you know it, as we're approaching the heat of budget season, Democrats announced they've reached a deal. A deal that Andrew Cuomo yesterday went before you and said that he had a large hand in crafting. Now make no mistake, this deal does not strip the governor's emergency powers. In fact, somehow it extends his emergency powers indefinitely until President Biden decides that the country is no longer in a state of emergency. That could be 2022. That could be 2023. We have no idea when the federal government would declare the pandemic over. This deal allows Andrew Cuomo to continue making changes to any order that already exists, which already impacts every single facet of our lives as New Yorkers. From how we worship, to how our kids go to school, to restaurants, to retail and beyond. This bill is nothing more than political window dressing, and it should be defeated tomorrow in both houses. It's not even half a loaf, it's a slice of bread. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why didn't they just do what is common sense to do, which is take their powers back? But there's already been reports of that the Democrats in the leadership of the legislature, they want to exploit the governor's weakened position and his scandals to get their tax and spend wish list in this budget. It's beyond reprehensible that the Democratic legislators would be willing to barter on the lives of 15,000 dead New York seniors and victims of sexual harassment to get what they want. They have supermajorities in both houses. They don't need to do it this way. This needs to be called what it is. They have a trilateral agreement between Andrea Stewart Cousins, Carl Hastie, and the governor to allow the governor to basically continue to do whatever the hell he wants. They would have been better off letting the powers sunset on April 30th like they were originally intended to do. Democrats' failure to act as an equal branch of government and to do their jobs as the highest paid state legislators in America is an absolute joke. They shouldn't have waited this long to pretend to care. We've known that this governor's been out of control since last summer. We knew then that his deadly nursing home order was a grave mistake. We knew then that he was hiding the real numbers. We knew then that his executive orders were arbitrary and capricious. We knew then that he was more interested in basking in the glow of a fawning national media that he wasn't actually following facts and science. And for months, we've watched while he was consumed with promoting his book and playing politics, undermining the vaccine. And now he undermined it so much he didn't even put a serious plan in place until it was too late to distribute that vaccine. For many months, local elected officials of all parties have been calling for more local control. Courts have continually ruled against the governor in all these executive powers. The judicial branch actually has done their job in New York State. Yet legislators in Albany have sat on their hands. They've turned a blind eye to the lawless and egregious havoc that Andrew Cuomo has wreaked on our state. 15,000 seniors died. Thousands of small businesses have been destroyed, and millions of children have needlessly fallen far behind in their education. It's a total disgrace. These legislative leaders, their failure to take real action makes them complicit in everything I've just stated. It's like we're living in the damn Twilight Zone. Only in Albany, in New York, can you have a governor who's under 2 major investigations, 2 very dark storm clouds over his tenure as governor. And then the legislature gives him a contract extension. Only in New York. These leaders are liars and they're hypocrites, and they have protected him at every turn. They're more afraid of his wrath than they are of the citizens that they've betrayed. And that needs to change, and it needs to change now. Andrew Cuomo is not fit to continue on as our governor. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. But of course he's not going to resign. So any legislator, oh, he should resign. They know he's not going to resign. You watched the video yesterday. He's not going anywhere. He's hunkering down and expecting you to forget all the things he's done. He doesn't have the integrity to resign on his own volition, and that's why I continue the Republican call for the impeachment of this governor. He's an abuser. He's a serial abuser. He's an abuser of people, and he's an abuser of power and laws. He's a twisted, ruthless thug. And every day he remains in office is because Speaker Carl Hastie and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins have allowed it. It's not just Republicans calling for his ouster. There's bipartisan calls for impeachment or resignation. And to the many that are still on the sidelines, what else do you need to know? We already have the evidence right in front of us. We have him on tape lying over and over again to the public, blaming everyone about the deadly nursing home order, and then even more lies about why they didn't release the data. We have his top aide on tape revealing they hid the data from DOJ because they knew it was incriminating, and they froze. We have the testimony of his brave victims who have stepped forward to expose his abuse, like Assemblyman Ron Kim and the women that we heard from last weekend that were sexually harassed. Yesterday's sham press conference and phony apology was an insult to 19 million New Yorkers. Andrew Cuomo is only sorry about one thing, and it's that he got caught, he got revealed for who he is and what he's been. You all know what he's at. Either your stations or your colleagues or you yourself have gotten those screaming phone calls, that abusive personality on full display. What I and millions of New Yorkers heard from Cuomo yesterday was someone who failed to take any responsibility for his own actions. And if he's so sorry, where was his apology for the families of the 15,000 seniors that lost their lives in nursing homes? You know, the same people that he called a death cult not too long ago. He said he wasn't ashamed of anything his administration has done. That, folks, is the real Andrew Cuomo. And we're going to keep calling out this dirty trilateral deal that has allowed his toxic culture of corruption and abuse of power to now continue indefinitely. Because I'm sure they're still going to pass it tomorrow. So I'm joined here by some good friends. We have with us Senator Dan Steck. Would you like to make a few remarks?
I sure would, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'll certainly add my 2 cents to this. I've been calling for the governor to be stripped of these powers for many months before these scandals. This should not be viewed as punitive, but they've not been necessary for a long time. The hour-to-hour need of a strong decision has been in the rearview mirror for many, many months. We have a constitutional obligation to be a co-equal branch of government. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have advocated that responsibility for many months. Add to that an admission from his own hierarchy that they concealed this death information on the COVID-19 deaths in the nursing homes. It's an admission. Yes, there's an investigation. Yes, we need to learn a lot more. But as a legislator, I know what I need to know on that front. That we were lied to. We've been admitted to that we've been lied to. And that's just one scandal, and the DOJ is going to take care of the rest of that story. But the flip side, the other scandal, there's another admission. He has admitted that he had these behavior problems. He's tried to explain them away, but he's not denying that these occurrences happened. No one in his office that's talked to these women is denying that they've talked to at least that one former staff member and relocated her. So on both scandals, there are admissions from the top. That's enough for me as a legislator to say enough is enough, and he's not qualified or capable of continuing as governor. This is a distraction to the people of the state of New York, the 19 million of us, $180 billion state budget that we need to figure out, and we're going to be distracted by this month. But yesterday's announcement of a stripping of powers is certainly a bait and switch. This is not a stripping of powers. If we were stripping his powers, instead of reacting to him with continued executive orders, and we have the chance to override them or refuse them, which we've had already this past year, and the legislature has never once utilized that authority. Instead of doing that, we should be passing legislation. He should come to us and say, in these circumstances, I want these new directives, and then we put it in the form of a bill, and we pass the bill and he signs it. That's how legislation is supposed to work, not the opposite way. And the final point that I want to make, and I know the chairman touched on it, yesterday at 1 o'clock, the governor had his press announcement where he rolled out this deal that it was very suggestive that not only was he involved in the negotiation, but that he embraced it and that this was a wonderful outcome, this bill that we're going to be voting on tomorrow. So much so that hours later, Speaker Hastie felt compelled to issue a clarifying press release that laid out in no uncertain terms 5 facts, as he called them, and I believe it was the 5th and final fact where he said the governor was not consulted in this. So they have very conflicting stories as to whether or not this was an arranged agreement or not. One of them is telling the truth and the other is not. But this is my 9th year doing legislation here in Albany. This is my 9th budget season, and I know a wink and a nod and a backroom deal when I smell one, and that's what I saw yesterday.
Thank you, Senator. And we have Assemblyman Ed Roth from Long Island.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your continued leadership with regards to the governor and calling out the single-party culture in Albany that's allowing this to continue. You know, this deal is a complete sham, and you don't have to look any further. If the governor is endorsing your plan to strip him of his powers, how do you sell to anybody that you're really stripping him of his power? If you believe that this is a repeal of the emergency powers, I have a bridge to sell you, or maybe one to name after you. This bill is basically going to allow the governor to continue to do everything he's been doing for the past year, and I would challenge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if this is a repeal, to give me one single example of something that the governor won't be able to do under this that he's done over the last year. And they won't be able to give me one because there are hundreds and hundreds of directives that impact each and every aspect of our lives, of our businesses, our ability to attend to religious services, everything under the sun. So the thing on top of it that would be funny if it wasn't such a serious thing is that we have thousands of businesses in this state who are going to read that the governor was stripped of his emergency powers, and then they're going to ask a very simple question. And again, I will challenge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to be frank and honest with their constituents. When that business owner calls them after this is enacted and says, what does this mean to me? And the answer is going to be absolutely nothing. And that is, again, would be funny if it wasn't so serious because it's impacting their livelihoods. So hopefully I'm not that optimistic this is going to happen, but I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will grow the backbone to reject this and go and enact a real repeal of these powers. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And we, lastly, Assemblyman Smalley.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really very simple. What we need to do is we need to strip the governor of his powers by taking every executive order, every directive, and zeroing them out. And then, with the legislature in session, go line by line, directive by directive, and vote and explain to all of our people why their freedoms, why their liberties have been taken for the last year, and decide which ones are necessary for the public health and safety. If we do that, then we have truly done our jobs. Anything else is just what my colleagues have said. It's just smoke and mirrors, and it's completely unacceptable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And now we'll take any questions from the media.
Yesterday, the Speaker of the House said that they didn't negotiate with the governor. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, it's funny. I looked at the slide that the governor put up, and he seemed like he was announcing a deal. He acted like he was part of a framework to put this together, and then the Speaker put out kind of an unorthodox press release saying that he wasn't consulted. So I guess I put it back to you that somebody's lying, and I guess it's up to the media to figure out who's lying, because I don't believe that they would kneecap the governor, because they've been afraid of him in every single term so far. They've been completely refused and dismissed other attempts to remove these executive powers, you know, this is such a half-hearted attempt that I can't help but think that he's right in the middle of it. I mean, you know, no one knows how to twist and turn the levers of government better than Andrew Cuomo. And I mean, this, just reading the legislation and the analysis of the legislation, it's so disheartening, because as you travel around and you talk to small business leaders and people that have suffered because of arbitrary and capricious executive orders, you know, many business owners have permanently lost their dreams and their aspirations. And they looked at that deadline of April 30th as light at the end of the tunnel. And I know I heard from a lot of people over the weekend that said, well, he's so weak now they could never extend his powers. And now those same people have to live with the fact that these cowardly leaders are going to give the governor carte blanche. I mean, there's already an executive order on basically everything down to your shoe size in this state. It is way too intrusive. And he can ebb and flow with those executive orders at will. And he hides behind the fact that, well, the legislature can cancel them out. They don't have the authority to take their power back. They're not going to overrule his executive orders. So I think that someone's lying in the discussion, and I presume that we'll learn more. But I really strongly urge any state legislator to vote no on this package, or don't vote at all, because it just, I mean, this is stupid to keep going in this fashion. You got a governor that's under the darkest cloud, you know, we've seen since probably, I don't know, what year was that, 2007? And here we sit. So, I mean, let's see who's lying.
We don't think that the governor was maybe trying to put the best face on a bad situation, like he said, like acting like he was for it all.
Well, then he'd be the liar. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. But somebody, one of the two lied yesterday. You know, and but the legislation is still pitiful. I mean, either he's lying or they should be ashamed of themselves. One of the two.
The speaker has argued this still prevents the governor from issuing any new directives. Isn't it in and of itself better than nothing?
No, because I'd rather have an expiration date on all of this nonsense and go back to living in a democracy rather than a dictatorship. That's the problem, is you have this hanging over everybody's head. Now, you know, they probably get a little more oversight in this deal, but everything came to a close and had a natural sunset on April 30th. Now it's whenever the federal government decides this all is over. I think we're a long, long way off from this all being over. There is no light at the end of the tunnel that we're going to have a permanent, you know, end to the virus. So I think that is what makes this the most egregious thing I've heard in a long time come out of this Capitol.
There are several members of the delegation, the congressional delegation, who are considering running for governor next year. Tom Reed, Lee Zeldin. Do you have a preference at this point?
I'm going to administer a process, and I think the world of both of those Congress members. I mean, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's a name that comes up often in conversation about the same office, but that doesn't limit it to only those people. We are putting a very widespread search for the next Republican governor of the state of New York, and we will have a screening process that will be conducted in short order and will hopefully conclude in the third quarter of this year. We are working very hard to lay that out and have to function in a world where we don't have mass-based gatherings quite yet. You know, some of the I guess the only positive piece of news that came out yesterday was things are loosening up a little bit with ability to gather, and hopefully that allows us to have some a little more widely attended forums. But we will continue that process. I focused everything on this target when I ran for chairman and when I got elected chairman in 2019, that my goal was to elect a Republican governor in 2022, and that's what my work and my purpose is for. So we're working day and night on that goal. Those are two great candidates, and we're going to screen and vet and invite anyone that's interested in perhaps running for governor to be a part of that process.
Do you think Governor Cuomo will run next year?
He looked like he's running to me yesterday. You know, when you have no shame and you have no remorse, I mean, those are crocodile tears, make no mistake. He's clearly not quitting. I think he's going to use the playbook of Governor Northam of Virginia, and I firmly believe that he'll try to seek another term. I don't see him going anywhere, unless they impeach him, which they should.
Are there any others that the governor has put out that you think should continue?
Well, you know, obviously when the virus infection rate was very high and before we knew what really all the effects were, and additionally prior to the vaccine, you know, yes, we had to have some executive orders early on, but I don't like the power being in the hands of one man. I don't think that's safe. It's not safe for taxpayers. It's not safe for freedom, and it's not our way of life in this country and in this state. But unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves. So I'm sure there's some common sense. I don't have them in front of me right now, but there are some things that make sense. But there's also things where it's just been so arbitrary. His own science has contradicted it. Look at the indoor dining numbers, where his own data came back and said 1.4% of infections came from indoor dining in restaurants. Yet we allowed our restaurant industry to be crippled, especially in New York City, for far too long, even though science wasn't on their side. Any other questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.